My thoughts on student loan forgiveness, the big issue up for debate that will be next on Jinka Jabo. So as I'm sure everyone has seen, in the last couple of days, there's been a lot of talk about forgiving and wiping out the student debt. And this initially came from Pocahontas, I believe. I'm sorry, I still call her Pocahontas. I think that's funny, and I'll explain it a little more later. But that is, Elizabeth Warren is saying that we should pay off everyone's student debt. And people are going crazy about this idea. My friends on the right are angry because it seems to be taking money from their taxes and then putting it to poor use. And my friends on the left are just really excited because, like myself and my siblings and pretty much everyone else I grew up with, this has been a monkey on our backs pretty much our whole lives. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And to begin with, I want to say that although my views are pretty conservative, I took one of those political compass things, and I'm just right of center. This is one issue where I certainly agree with the Democrats, or I guess the far left, even socialist elements like AOC and Sanders and Warren, who keep pushing this left and keep making this an issue. I actually do agree with them, in part because of the $3.5 trillion spent in useless wars since I was in high school, since 9/11. You know, I consider that. I did the math once. If you divided that between the estimated, I guess, 300 million people that were living in the States at the time, you know, that comes up to 50 grand for each of us. And I'm not just talking about the college students. I'm not talking about the adults. I'm talking about everyone from infant to whatever Smucker's commercial 120-year-old out in Connecticut, right? It'd be 50,000 for all of us. Now that's just the 3.5 trillion that we've spent on these useless wars, invading countries that didn't have weapons of mass destruction and bombing hospitals and stuff like that, killing children. We also spent 498 billion on bank bailouts. Money that went directly to the banks, that, you know, there's the housing bubble and everything. It's hard to think about, but I remember the recession, and the recession is a big reason why I left the United States. But that was a huge thing where it all just collapsed, and suddenly the cost of everything went up and wages went down, and that continued to be the case when I was back even just a few years ago. Now, I'll talk about my story in a little bit here, but let's just say this is a big case of victim blaming. Everyone's saying, okay, well, these students shouldn't have taken out the loans. They should know better than to go to school. They should know that this is that they can't sustain this. When speaking for myself and for others who are first generation college graduates, it's pretty much like that old Woody Allen joke where he says everything they said would be good for us, like red meat and eggs, and college ended up being bad for us. And so we all just walked right into the machine, like we were let in, like, go ahead, get into school here. And while we're wasting your money on these foreign wars and on these bank bailouts, you're going to rack up debt that you'll still be paying for 10, 20 years. Yeah, okay, so I think we can afford however many billions it takes to cover our student debts. And I think that would be a good thing because everyone would be investing more. As I've done in my previous talks about millennials, you know, we are a generation that doesn't invest in things, but we invest in experiences. And thus, we haven't really contributed to the economy. We haven't built much, from cars to babies. You know, we haven't really produced much that will last beyond ourselves. We've been a consumptive generation, and I think that's one reason is because it's so hard to save, it's so hard to put things away. And so let's not blame these teenagers or these young 20-somethings who get out of school but let's instead give them that. I mean, I've heard people that support reparations that are like African American reparations that are against this. I think it's just a lot of hurt that so many people have just gone along with it and paid their debts, and now they're mad that the next generation won't have to touch it at all. It's like, he was forgiven more, what about me? Like that case in the Bible. Anyway, in my situation, I have both my bachelor's and my master's. And I paid for my bachelor's degree within 5 years of earning it. And I'm still working on my master's, or paying off my master's now. And so I'll explain both. When I started university, this was in 2002, I thought I was a Cherokee, Native American, and so I thought, okay, I'll just put it, because I'd been told that my whole, growing up, we all thought we were Indians. We all thought we were Cherokee, and so I marked that on my form, and they didn't ask for any proof of that or anything else. I had a few other things going for me, like I had really good grades and did a lot of extracurricular stuff when I was in college, And I worked federal work studies, which was great. I remember I would get paid to just read books to children. And I love doing that for free. I'd do that for free, and so that was my job. And so that helped me with my tuition costs. And in the end, I came out after 4 years with a bill of $10,000. And I started paying that off right away. I was able to find work pretty soon, professional work pretty soon after that. But then the economy collapsed, and so I moved to South Korea. And in South Korea, I made lots of money, so I was able to, even with all my medical bills, I was able to stash that money. While the rest of America was going through a recession, I was able to stash away enough money just to wipe out that debt. And I remember when they sent me that letter, I got the paper letter in Korea saying, congratulations, you paid off everything. I felt on top of the world that I now had a degree and that I had done the honorable thing and paid it off completely. Fast forward a few years, I initially thought of going to law school. Thank God I did not. But then I still wanted to complete my education, so I thought I'd get my master's in English to help me with teaching. And that ended up costing me about 60 grand, which I still owe, in fact. And so for those of you out there complaining about the debts over your heads, I know how you feel. 60 grand is pretty bad. I think it's on the upper end of what people owe back. And this is for a 2-year degree, which I don't understand. Like 4 years of classes to get my bachelor's was only 10 grand, but this was 60 grand. So maybe it was my Elizabeth Warren trick. Maybe it was saying that I was Native American that somehow covered a lot of that cost. I have no way of saying, but I'm not going to be like her, and I'm not going to say, oh, well, I know for sure that it didn't help me at all. Anyway, so they had stuck me with 60 grand. I had no clue. But I was getting my degree in teaching English, so I thought, well, I plan on being overseas anyhow. But while racking up that debt, I was earning $8 an hour. $8 an hour. Editing master's thesis papers from ESL students, which was it's an excruciating task, because not only are you helping with English, but it's high level, grammatically sound, and yet doesn't quite sound natural, like very specific. You have to be very clued in on reflexives and pronouns and tenses to really put all that together. And it was great training, but at the same time, for $8 an hour, while earning that debt, that's probably foolish of me, but I'm not sure how the university could justify paying me so little when they were charging me so much. But I get the feeling that all schools kind of went through that, and as a result of the recession. And graduating in 2006, right before the recession hit, my first degree naturally wasn't as expensive. Anyway, I graduated in 2014, I think, 5 years ago, and with my master's, And I've been overseas pretty much the entire time. I initially went to Saudi Arabia first because I had the potential of making 200,000 a year. That would have wiped out my debt in just 1 year, but for various reasons, I decided not to do that. And one of those is that there is such a thing as income-based repayment, these IBR plans that Trump really supports, actually. And I realized, getting on one of those, as long as I wasn't accumulating a lot of wealth, I'd be okay because I wouldn't be defaulting, but I wouldn't be expected to make payments while earning and paying taxes and living and covering all of my expenses overseas. And so that's my advice for people out there. Get on these income-based plans if you can. But I guess if you have children or something, I don't know. If you have a family, it's probably way more complicated than all that. I'm just saying this is how I was able to work it out. And hopefully, inshallah, in another 5 years, maybe another 10 years at most, this debt will just be wiped out. Failing that, I make a huge fortune, which is very possible, and I go back and pay it off directly. I'd like to pay it off in one sum rather than giving all that interest. Like, the interest you guys are paying is insane. Navient, like the big company, they just posted record profits based on that usury of children. But anyway, my last option would be Miss Elizabeth Warren gets elected and she wipes out my debt, and I decide, you know what? I'm going to go back to America and I'm going to read to children. And I think I could do that. That'll be my job. And so if she wants to propose that, if she's serious about that, and she talks about that tomorrow on the debates that I'm very excited for, I just have one thing to say to you, Miss Elizabeth Warren, and that is Wingapo. Over and out.